Today, the Matt Walsh Show, a Democrat politician announces that she has sterilized herself to avoid getting pregnant in Donald Trump's America. She had to do this, I guess, because of the imaginary law Donald Trump just passed requiring all women to get pregnant. Also, one of the staffers working for DOGE goes by the name Big Balls, and now CNN is on the case. They are on the Big Balls beat and tracking everything that Big Balls does. And a trans-identified male actor was on the verge of making history by winning the Best Actress Award at the Oscars, but now his dreams are crashing down after some old tweets have come to light. We'll talk about all that and more today on the Matt Walsh Show. You know what's interesting about the current state of health and wellness? Everyone's chasing the latest trend, the newest fad, the most exotic supplement, but sometimes the most powerful solutions are the most fundamental ones. That's why I want to tell you about Armra Colostrum. Colostrum isn't some laboratory creation. It's literally the first food nature provides to every mammal at birth. We're talking about nature's original superfood packed with over 400 bioactive nutrients that your body instinctively knows how to use. And Armra has perfected a way to deliver this performance substance in its purest form. The secret is in their proprietary cold chain biopotent pasteurization technology. While other supplements lose their potency through processing, Armra's method preserves these vital nutrients exactly as nature intended. Plus, they source everything from grass-fed cows and American family farms, supporting our agricultural communities while delivering a premium product. What I appreciate most is that it's not another artificial supplement. It's a natural whole food that works in harmony with your body, helping to maintain mental clarity and improve immune health. In times when we're surrounded by synthetic solutions and processed products, isn't it refreshing to find something that's both innovative and completely natural? This is the kind of advancement that we should champion, one that enhances what nature has already perfected. We've worked out a special offer for my audience. Receive 15% off your first order when you go to tryarmra.com/Walsh or enter code Walsh. That's TRYARMRA.com/Walsh. If you have a job or any kind of normal human interest whatsoever, you probably have not heard of something called the 50-51 movement to protest Donald Trump, Elon Musk, etc. But it's a real thing that just happened in this country. This is one of several protests, along with the recent Day Without an Immigrant protests that have apparently occurred and that pretty much no one noticed. I don't know if you realize, but we went a day without immigrants and not a single person noticed, which I don't think is the message they were trying to send. And this is the state of the anemic anti-Trump resistance this time around. So the idea of the 50-51 movement in particular was apparently to have 50 protests in 50 states in one day. And so they mashed all those numbers together and told everyone to show up to their local state capital on this past Wednesday. This is something that started as an idea on Reddit in some kind of semi-viral post. And it turned out exactly how you'd expect a Reddit-created movement to go. Every aspect of this movement has been a colossal failure. In fact, it was such a failure in so many entertaining ways that it's worth talking about a little bit now. So first of all, the turnout was abysmal. I skimmed about a dozen news articles on this protest, from the AP to ABC to various local news outlets. Not a single one of them mentioned the total number of state capitals that were involved in these protests. That obviously suggests that they didn't get anywhere near all 50 of them. Instead, it looks like a handful of protesters, less than 1,000 people in many cases, showed up to a handful of state capitals, and they held signs that contradicted themselves in many cases. So here, for example, was the scene in Salem, Oregon. And you'll notice that they have signs that say, "Deport Elon," alongside signs that say, "Education, not deportation," and "No human is illegal." Watch. So one thing you'll notice is that the highest concentration of people in COVID masks that you'll find anywhere since like September of 2021. And you have to wonder what would happen if one of these protesters with a no deportation sign happened to bump into somebody with the deport Elon sign. It's like the beginning of a Netflix rom-com. They'd look at the signs, then look into each other's eyes, and they'd say something that nobody would understand because they both are wearing N95 masks and a ventilator. If Amelia Perez can get 13 Oscar nominations, then that idea is worth at least 14, I would say. Now, in any event, this is one of the little inconsistencies that you always notice very quickly whenever you pay attention to leftists for 5 seconds. They support gun confiscation unless you want to use your gun to shoot a health insurance CEO. They say the legal system is corrupt and we should defund the police. And then they celebrate as prosecutors attempt to destroy pro-lifers, Donald Trump, January 6 protesters, and so on. And now they say they oppose deportations unless we're talking about one of their political enemies like Elon Musk, even though Elon Musk is a U.S. citizen. But as entertaining as all this is, there was one moment that really stood out from these 50-51 protests, and it occurred on the lawn outside the Michigan State Capitol. Here's what happened, according to the outlet called Michigan Advance. Quote, Michigan State Representative Lori Pahutsky said Wednesday that she underwent surgery earlier this year to become voluntarily sterile out of fear for the future of reproductive health care access with President Donald Trump back in office. Yes, a Democrat state lawmaker sterilized herself because, in her estimation, Trump might end her reproductive health care access. And here's how the representative explained her decision on Wednesday, quote, just under 2 weeks ago, I underwent surgery to ensure that I would never have to navigate a pregnancy in Donald Trump's America. I refuse to let my body be treated as currency by an administration that only sees value in my ability to procreate. If you know people who are questioning how serious this is, I'm going to repeat myself. A sitting government official opted for voluntary sterilization because she was uncertain that she would be able to access contraception in the future. Close quote. Now, before we even get into the specifics here, we need to talk about that last line. I'm not usually one for nitpicking how politicians deliver their speeches. Well, I guess I am. I nitpick it all the time. But this does cross a line. She starts talking about herself in the third person as a way to lend some gravitas to what she's trying to communicate. She says a sitting government official opted for voluntary sterilization because of Donald Trump. That's how serious things are. But the government official that she's talking about is herself. So this just doesn't work as a rhetorical device. Just makes her look crazy. If things were really this serious, then other people would be sterilizing themselves too, and she could use them as examples. But she has to use herself as an example because nobody else, even in a state like Michigan, is quite as insane as she is. But the bigger issue, of course, is that Pahutsky's decision to spay herself like a house cat makes no sense whatsoever. I mean, first of all, believe it or not, and this is something that all feminists should probably listen to and hear, it is possible to avoid getting pregnant without sterilizing yourself. And guess what? Even if Project 2025 outlaws contraception and abortion, even if that happens, that would still be true. You know, you could still avoid getting pregnant. So it's like if you decided that you really hate jogging and you never want to go for a jog again, so you cut your own legs off to avoid it. I mean, it's overkill, to say the least. But at a Reddit protest, this kind of thing apparently gets applause, so presumably that's why she did it. But the other problem here is that even by Pahutsky's own logic, she has no reason to sterilize herself. That's because abortion is legal in Michigan. And it's legal in Michigan because leftists like her have spent their entire political careers making sure that mothers can kill their children pretty much anytime they want for any reason in her state. Pahutsky has put out several videos on social media talking about how abortion is readily available in Michigan thanks to her efforts. Here's one of them.
I just wanted to take a little bit of time to talk about how I'm so immensely grateful for all of the work that has gone into advancing abortion rights. Obviously, voters protected the right to abortion in our state's constitution. Here in the legislature, we've been expanding that right and the accessibility to it, but there's a lot more work to do. So the anniversary of Roe v. Wade is a really good time to reflect on everything that we've gotten done, but also acknowledge that we still have our work cut out for us.
So voters protected the right to an abortion, but they still have their work cut out for them. At the time, it wasn't clear what she meant by that, but I guess now we know. It means women have to get sterilized. That's the final stage of Lori Pahutsky's abortion advocacy. It's not really about giving women the, quote, right to choose. It's about making sure that women don't have children, period. On social media, Pahutsky has been desperately defending her decision. For example, she wrote, quote, the fact that so many conservative men take personal offense to a decision that I made with my husband about my health care and future just proves the point that we shouldn't assume that the right is secure. Now, just to be clear, nobody is offended by the fact that you sterilized yourself, Lori. Like, we're not offended by that. We just think it's dumb. This is like if you started banging your own head against a brick wall and we watched it and said, well, that's strange behavior. And then you shouted, you snowflakes are triggered, aren't you? as you continue to bash your own skull into dust. I will say, though, assuming what she's saying is actually true, that she did get sterilized, which who knows, there probably does need to be an investigation of whatever doctor performed this procedure. You know, if I go to my doctor tomorrow and say that I need to be sterilized because Democrats are going to force me to have kids, then it's pretty clear I'm not sane enough to consent to any kind of surgery. At the same time, I don't really need to say much more about this particular politician. Every post she makes is getting completely roasted on social media. Her stunt has backfired on her, and it's not the first time that this kind of thing has happened to Lori Bohutsky, by the way. Why don't you take a look at this footage, just because it's fun. It's from a couple of years ago, and it shows this same woman making some remarks in the State House about the importance of repealing an old abortion ban in Michigan. And as you watch this clip, pay close attention to the big law book that she has on the desk next to her, in which she's going to use as her prop to make this big performative show. Watch.
Speaker recognizes Representative Bohutsky.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Last November, voters in Michigan overwhelmingly supported Proposal 3. Everyone serving in this chamber was sent here with a clear task after last November. And I am grateful that we are finally addressing it and repealing this archaic and punitive law once and for all. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Now, I mean, of course, if you're just listening to the audio podcast, you didn't catch it. Even if you're watching the video, you might not have caught it. So Bohutsky has the law book open to the page where the abortion ban is in the law book. But then the page flips a bunch of times when she starts speaking so that she loses her place. So it's no longer on the page with the abortion law. And at the end of the clip, in her big moment of rhetorical flourish, Bohutsky grabs the book, which is now open to the wrong page, turned to some completely different page. Like there's a different law in there now that she's like, and she seems to notice this and hesitate before she decides she doesn't care. And she just rips that random page out of the law book and then performatively tears it up. It was a simple stunt that this woman somehow managed to screw up. So now I'm wondering if she actually did sterilize herself, or did she go in wanting to be sterilized, but instead she accidentally got a root canal or something. Anyway, Lori Bohutsky is a self-described radical feminist, one of many who has spent the last few years engaging in dumb performances like this instead of actually accomplishing anything at all. And now, as Trump's second administration gets underway, these people look more pitiful than they've ever looked, which is saying something because they've always looked quite pitiful. You know, a few years ago, you may remember, we were promised a massive backlash against Republicans with, women rising up across the nation because of Roe. We were told that fighting for the unborn would doom the Republican Party, to irrelevance. That's what we were told, even by people on the right, even by conservatives. But that didn't happen, and still has not happened. Instead, Trump, who got into office in a massive landslide and with the popular vote, he's turned around and defended "quote unquote" women's rights more than Joe Biden ever did, or Kamala Harris ever would have. Because of radical feminists like Lori Bohutsky, Democrats have thrown all of their political capital behind the deranged proposition that men can transform into women and that men should be able to invade women's private spaces as well as women's sports. Democrats' commitment to this insanity led to this moment at the White House this week, which we talked about the other day, but let's watch it again.
In a few moments, I'll sign a historic executive order to ban men from competing in women's sports. It's about time. My administration will not stand by and watch men beat and batter female athletes. From now on, women's sports will be only for women. In recent years, the radical left has waged an all-out campaign to erase the very concept of biological sex and replace it with a militant transgender ideology. We're honored to be joined today by many incredible advocates for women's sports, including the brave swimmer at the forefront of this battle. And Riley Gaines is a person that I've been watching. With my action this afternoon, we're putting every school receiving taxpayer dollars on notice that if you let men take over women's sports teams or invade your locker rooms, you will be investigated for violations of Title IX and risk your federal funding. There will be no federal funding.
So you contrast that footage of Trump signing an executive order preserving women's sports as he's flanked by smiling young women with the footage from the so-called 50-51 movement. Contrasts the footage of Trump footage of Trump with the bitter, vengeful feminists who are now maiming themselves for no reason they can explain. In less than 3 years after the Dobbs decision, Republicans are more appealing to most women than the so-called feminist movement, and it's not even close. This is a victory that a lot of people, including conservatives, thought was impossible not all that long ago. They made the case that we should compromise on abortion and gender ideology in order to appeal to women out of political expedience. But as lunatics like Lori Pahutsky embarrass themselves and leftists hold protests that nobody attends, it's hard not to notice that nobody's making that argument anymore. Now let's get to our 5 headlines. History, economics, the great works of literature, the meaning of the U.S. Constitution. Did you study these things in school? Probably not. Or even if you did, maybe it's time for a refresher. Time and technology have changed a lot of things, but they have not changed basic fundamental truths about the world and our place in it. That's why I'm so excited that Hillsdale College is offering more than 40 free online courses in the most important and enduring subjects. You can learn about the works of C.S. Lewis, the stories in the book of Genesis, the meaning of the U.S. Constitution, the rise and fall of the Roman Republic, or the history of the ancient Christian church with Hillsdale College's online courses, all available for free. That's right, they are free. I personally recommend you sign up for Marxism, Socialism, and Communism. This brand new online course is unlike anything Hillsdale's produced before. You'll explore how many ideas in American politics today are rooted in Marxism and also how they differ from Marxist thought. It's vital that we take these ideas and historical figures seriously so we can see the injustice and evil inherent in them and are better equipped to defeat them. Start your free course, Marxism, Socialism, and Communism, today. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/Walsh to start. It's free, easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/Walsh to start, hillsdale.edu/Walsh. So the media have been digging into DOGE, which is, of course, the Department of Government Efficiency, and they've been trying to figure out who these dastardly villains are who are concocting this devious scheme to save taxpayers' money. They're very worried about it, the media is. So yesterday, CNN had a report on one of these DOGE staffers, and what they discovered is pretty disturbing. This is pretty disturbing stuff. Listen.
So this is a 19-year-old high school graduate who has used the unfortunate nickname Big Balls online. So that would be one way that we could refer to him. He is now working at Musk's behest inside DOGE. And we looked into his background. And so we found, several notable things, Aaron, one of which is that this individual has founded multiple companies, including one with another unfortunate name, Tesla.Sexy LLC. Which he established in 2021. He would have been around 16 years old. Now, this LLC controls dozens of web domains.
So, Kara, you hear this, and you have known Elon Musk for years. So now you look at these young men who are now in data and in the private information about maybe hundreds of millions of American citizens as young as 19, the big balls here that Katie's talking about. Most of them are in their early 20s. There's an exception I'm going to get to in a minute. I'm curious, though, Kara, how well does even Musk know these young men, do you think?
I have no idea. I think there is no vetting whatsoever, as you can see, that's taken place. It took Katie and the really great team. Wired has done an astonishing job here. I could make a joke that's probably why he was hired for all this ridiculous nonsense and other nefarious things. But, there's an expression in technology. It's a feature, not a bug.
Now, she keeps saying these are unfortunate names. I disagree. I think that they're quite fortunate. I think these names this is quite fortunate. Big Balls, Tesla.Sexy, whatever. It's fortunate because it forces them to say the names. That's what's fortunate about it. Anyway, Big Balls, I might have known. I should have known. Of course, this is the work of Big Balls. When I first heard about DOGE and what they were doing, I said to myself, This has Big Balls written all over it. Big Balls is up to no good. Big Balls, that mischievous scoundrel. Damn you, Big Balls. That's what I said. I said that. Here's another interesting fact. I don't know if you knew this, but Big Balls is actually his birth name. That's actually the man's name. His last name is Balls, and so his parents said they named their. What else are they going to name him? I mean, with a last name like Balls, what What kind of first name are you going to get? What are you going to call them? Small? I mean, of course you're going to call them the big balls. It makes a lot of sense. So I'm glad that CNN is on the case, and they're going to be tracking big balls. They're going to be watching big balls very closely. From what I understand, Anderson Cooper has also volunteered for the big balls tracking team. That's just a report I heard. I heard when the CNN said they're going to be doing all these reports and looking into big balls, and Anderson Cooper said, "I'm there. I'm on it. I'm on it." That's what he said. So I don't know why, but and so they're all going to be watching big balls. They're going to be watching big balls to make sure they're not going to let. Tell you what, these women and Anderson Cooper, they're not going to let big balls out of their sight. They won't. We can be sure of that. So, big balls aside, I have to say that the reaction to DOGE and what, when even I have trouble getting through this with a straight face, we know that, Mr. Big Balls, you know it's comedic genius. Man, I don't know when he thought of that nickname, but I like to think that this was some long con on his part, that the whole point of taking on this nickname was just for this. The greatest trolling job of all time in that case. And maybe he didn't know. Maybe when he took on the nickname Big Balls, he didn't know what was going to happen. He didn't know what he was going to do, but he did know. He said, I'm going to take on this name, and then I'm going to do something that forces CNN to report on me. Maybe that's what happened. So I have to say, the reaction to DOGE and what Elon Musk and his team is doing has been, of course, very revealing, and we've talked about it. What it shows is that for the establishment, no cuts to the federal government, no spending cuts of any kind are acceptable, because what DOGE is doing, this is what it actually means to cut waste and fraud and abuse. It means you have to open the books and go through them line by line and then actually start cutting out all the BS. You have to assemble a team of people who know how to get into these systems and identify the waste and then let them do what they do. This is the way it's done. It's the only way to do it. And it's only shocking to us, or to CNN anyway, and to the left more broadly, because nobody's ever done it. No president has ever actually made any attempt to cut any waste at all. Every Republican has talked about it. None of them have done it until now. And one other quick point about DOGE, there's all this hand-wringing about the fact that these are unelected employees who are going in and rooting out this waste and fraud. And just keep in mind, of course, that when all these people complain about the unelected employees, when they defame and slander the good name of Mr. Big Balls, they're utterly full of crap, because the federal government is comprised of literally millions of unelected bureaucrats. Millions of them. So unelected bureaucrats have exercised profound, unchecked, dictatorial control over our lives for decades. So you have these morons that are saying, oh, but these DOGE employees, they have so much access to our personal information. Big Balls is looking at our personal information. Yeah, well, unelected bureaucrats have been doing that forever. What do you mean? Like, the only reason that they have access to that information is because other bureaucrats had access to it. So the whole thing is they don't mean it. Like, they don't actually have a problem. They have no sort of philosophical problem with unelected employees having access to all of this kind of supposedly sensitive information, because that has been the case since approximately forever. And then Big Balls gets his hands on it, and all of a sudden it's a problem. All of a sudden people got an issue with it. Here's someone who's a fan of Big Balls. AOC, well, I don't know how she feels about Big Balls, actually, but AOC is giving advice on, I had to figure out some kind of transition there, but AOC is giving advice to her fans on how to resist ICE and deportations. Listen to this.
Principle number one in what you can do is that when one of these things comes to your backyard, you can resist. And what that happens over millions of people is that you generate enough friction that they cannot go as fast as they want to go, okay? So I'm going to give you some examples that have already been working. Let's start with immigration and ICE. When people say, what can we do? In my community, we are a heavily immigrant community. ICE raids deeply affect and disrupt our community. So, number one, if you live in a community with a lot of immigrants, know your rights. That's one tangible thing you can do that I want you to do. And that means know your rights if you are a US citizen as well. Okay? Here's one way that we're going to create some friction in this system. Tom Homan, who's directing a lot of these ICE operations nationally, etc., he went on TV practically crying. This dude was whining his ass off because ICE went into the city of Chicago, and Chicago had prepared for them. Community organizers, activists, and their mayor and local elected officials who were solid on this issue, they educated the city on their legal rights. Because what ICE tries to do is that they rely on people not knowing their rights in order to enter buildings, in order to search workplaces, etc. So when you know your rights, you are able to tell them no, and they do walk away. What you can do is protect people around you and also make sure that you are slowing down this system. The slower they operate, the less they can break.
So there's not a lot to even say about this that hasn't already been said. And to this audience, it will all be quite obvious that what you're hearing from AOC is now she's trying to cloak it in know your rights. And she's attempting to frame it that way so that she's not guilty of multiple crimes by advising people on how to avoid, federal law enforcement, how to avoid, how to obstruct the legitimate legal operations of the federal government. That's what she's advising people on. But she cloaks it in know your rights. But it's not about rights. I mean, she gives the game away multiple times by saying, this is not simply her, well, know your rights, and as long as your rights are being respected, then the federal government should be able to do what they do, and they should be able to enforce the border and enforce our immigration law. That's not it. She's explicitly, her intention here is, she says, to slow down the system, to obstruct the system, to create friction, she says. And you add this to the Democrats who have more explicitly, and I think in less subtle ways, advised people to break the law, or even stated outright that they themselves are going to break the law. We know the governor of New Jersey, I believe it was Phil Murphy, who said it implied heavily that he was hiding illegal aliens in his own house. And I believe he came out after the fact, after Tom Homan responded to that by saying, well, we're going to look into it. If it's true, we're going to prosecute. Then Phil Murphy came out and said, well, I didn't mean it literally. I mean, metaphorically. There's a metaphorical illegal alien in my metaphorical basement. So he backed away from it. But these people, they're at a minimum coming very close to the line of breaking the law, committing federal crimes. And we are certainly going to get to the point, I think, when an example is going to have to be made of somebody, some prominent, ideally more than one, but at least some prominent elected Democrat figure is going to have to be prosecuted for this kind of thing, because you are directly, explicitly trying to obstruct the operations of the federal government. You're trying to obstruct them from enforcing federal law. And they're going to have to make an example out of someone. and make the Democrats regret having already set the precedent here. Because here's the thing. If Donald Trump were to, let's say, prosecute Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez for explicitly trying to obstruct the federal government and the enforcement of federal law, if he were to do that, it would not even be an unprecedented, unheard of thing. After all, these are the same people who spent 4 years trying to put a former president in prison. So they've as much as they worry about normalizing, they've normalized this. And I think it's going to come back to bite them, and it should. Daily Wire has this. A Pennsylvania school superintendent announced he would resign amid questions from parents about his decision to allow a genderqueer witch, quote unquote, to survey students on sexual matters without their consent. Unionville Chad's Ford School District Superintendent John Sanville said Friday that he'd be stepping down from his position on July 31st. Over the past year, Sanville has faced criticism from parents after a self-identified genderqueer witch surveyed students about their sexual history at the end of the 2023 school year. He didn't mention the ongoing investigations and controversy when he stepped down, but it's clear that that's the reason he's stepping down. It's good that this guy is resigning. I think he should be in jail too, but a resignation is better than nothing. This does bring up an important point that I want to make, which is that the wokeness problem, as we call it, is deeply, deeply embedded in the public school system, which means that even as a lot of this stuff seems to be dying out, even as it seems to be receding in the general culture, that's not really the case in public school. Now, I think parents have gotten better in recent years at identifying and responding to the most egregious examples of left-wing radicalism in the schools, like here when a genderqueer warlock or whatever is talking to kids about sex. That's about as egregious as it could possibly get. And the parents spoke out and they got accountability. And they got rid of the superintendent, which is a pretty big deal. I mean, that's a big victory. As far as accountability goes in a public school environment, that's the most you could possibly hope for. And that's great. My point, though, is that the public school system is a left-wing institution down to its core. Even when I was in school, that was the case. And that was long before the term woke had ever been used or had been coined. So even if we can get wokeness back to like 2002 levels, back when it wasn't wokeness, we just called it political correctness. But even if we do that, it still would not be a good environment to send your kids into every day for their whole childhood. The public school system will remain radically left-wing, most likely for several more generations at least. And how will we know? How will we know that things have actually improved? I think here's how we'll know that the school system, well, not just improved. I mean, I think things in general are improving in the school system ever so slightly. But here's how we'll know that the school system is not a left-wing indoctrination camp anymore. I'll give you two indicators. These are two signs to look out for. One is this: comprehensive sex education is no longer taught in schools in any form. Now, getting rid of the most egregious and depraved excesses of sex education is fine, it's good, but there's no such thing as an appropriate, much less conservative public school education course. It doesn't exist. Comprehensive sex education was invented to sexually indoctrinate children, to groom children. That's why it was invented. It's been doing that for many, many decades. Long before I was even in elementary school, that was the case. So the abolition of sex education, period, is one indicator that maybe the school system is no longer a left-wing indoctrination camp. Here's another one. When the schools teach a form of history, a true form, an honest form of history, where men like Christopher Columbus are presented as heroes, which is what they are, what he was especially. And the schools haven't done that in a very long time. Again, even when I was in school, what we were told about Christopher Columbus was basically that he was nothing but a genocidal freak. I mean, that was the case 30 years ago. So wokeness, radical leftism, has very deep roots in the public school system. Then just, imagine a public school system where there's no sex ed of any kind, and kids are taught to admire our historical heroes like Christopher Columbus. Now, those two things alone don't mean that they're getting a quality education, but they're very strong indicators, very, very strong indicators that the education system is no longer leftist down to its core. And we are a very far way, we're a very far way off from that. You know, we've got a long way to go. So what should you do in the meantime? Well, it won't surprise you that my answer is homeschool. Get these depraved freaks out of the school as much as possible, but you can't get them all out. So homeschooling is the answer. Let's get to the comment section.
If you're a man, it's required that you grow a beard. Hey, we're the Sweet Baby Gang.
You know those days when you're staring at your closet trying to find something that looks good but doesn't feel like you're wearing a stiff, uncomfortable suit of armor? That was me until I discovered Public Rec. Listen, I just received one of their charcoal long sleeve shirts and a pair of their military khaki Dealmaker pants. And I can't even begin to tell you how amazing and comfortable they both are. In fact, I wore them both yesterday. It was a legitimately very comfortable outfit. And the crazy thing is the pants look like premium dress pants, but feel like my favorite sweats. So they're really comfortable, but nobody would know it if they're looking at you because it looks very very fancy. You don't have to settle for those generic small, medium, large sizes either. They let you pick your exact width and length, which means no matter your size, you're going to get the perfect fit. After wearing these pants, I can tell you personally that the fabric they use is incredible. It's got this perfect amount of stretch, but it doesn't get baggy or lose its shape. And here's the best part, though. It's not just pants. They've got polos, hoodies, and more. All of it is next level comfortable. Everything they make just fits better and feels better than what you're probably wearing right now. So this February, treat yourself right, because comfort is always in season. Upgrade to Public Rec and feel the difference. For a limited time, you can get 20% off at Public Rec by using code Walsh at checkout. Just head to publicrec.com, use code Walsh, and you're all set. Oh, and when they ask how you found them, be sure to mention our show. It really helps us out, and you can find your perfect fit. Never compromise on comfort either. Public Rec, where comfort rules. Can Matt be funny or entertaining without sarcasm? He's so incredibly reliant on it. I really like to see this guy just take 15 seconds at the end of each sarcastic monologue to just issue a plain, clear thought. That'd be the best version of Matt, in my opinion. I mean, isn't that like asking Jimi Hendrix to play without his guitar, or like asking Rembrandt to use colored pencils instead of paint? Sarcasm is my medium. It's my instrument. It's the paint. It's the paint that I use. Although I guess I could take your suggestion and explain my sarcasm every time I use it. Just right at the end of every monologue, I could go, but seriously, folks, here's the lesson that I want you to take away from this. I could do that. That wouldn't ruin the joke at all, would it? So thanks for the suggestion. I'll think about implementing that. Is it just me, or has Matt beefed up significantly? I'm not mad. It's just steroids. I started taking steroids just so I could sit here and do a podcast. I shoot up steroids and then come into this room and do a podcast. Because why not? The screen time problem is so very serious and appalling. I have a 9-month-old baby, and I'm in a Facebook group of women with 8 and 9-month-old babies from all around the country, thousands of women. I was truly, truly shocked at how many of these women are giving their babies not only screen time on a daily basis, but who are giving their babies an hour or more of screen time every day at 9 months old. Well, that's insane. I mean, there should be zero screen time at 9 months old. There's just no reason. Like, I'm not saying that if you walk through a room and the TV's on, that you got to hide your baby's face or something, like their brain is going to melt the instant they look at a screen. But there's just no reason why you should be putting your child in front of a screen at the age of 9 months old. That is insane. And you, unless your intention is to condition them so that they are utterly reliant on screens from birth. And the only reason why parents would intend to do that or would want to do that is just because it makes their own lives easier. It's just because, as a parent, if you're doing that, it's because your primary concern as a parent is just to make your life easier and to keep the kid quiet so that you can do what you want, which also ends up inevitably being just going on, using a screen. And that is very wrong. You need to give your child a chance to develop interests outside of the screen. And you should, and this is not impossible to achieve this, where it should end up that by the time your child is, 7 or 8 years old, where even if you tried to just put them in front of a screen all day, you wouldn't be able to, because they would be bored and would want to just go run and play outside. Right? If you've done this right, then by the time your kid is 7 or 8, you don't even have to, it's not as much of a fight to get them to not use screens all the time, because they don't want to just sit and watch screens all the time. I'm Gen X and really enjoyed television when I was a kid, to the point that it was something I really looked forward to watch as much as possible. Then I spent 6 months in my teens in a household with no TV. That made a huge difference in my development, to the point that once I got back around it, I really despised the trite, over-commercialized dreck, and I couldn't stand to be around it. Eventually, I would watch a show or two, but I never really had the taste for it in the same way. It opened up my mind to the inner contemplation and ability to self-entertain dramatically. I think that kids and phones are very similar in a much more extreme way to television, the way it primes you for passive entertainment. You crave that constant entertainment and begin to depend on it to stimulate your mind to the exclusion of normal thought. It's very damaging, since any new discoveries or great ideas are crowded out by the craving and stimulus of a screen. Exactly right. And I think that, I do think something very similar happens with phones and social media, which is why it can be very useful, and it's a very healthy thing to, you hear people going on a detox from screens, and it just not, putting the screens away for a week, 2 weeks, whatever. And I can say that in my case, just personally, when I go on vacation, I'm pretty determined not to scroll through my phone and not to use the screens. I don't go on social media or anything like that when I'm on vacation. And what I find is that when I come back, I kind of have the similar experience to you, that when I come back, and now I'm back to life and I'm back to work, and for me, part of my job is I have to use, I'm on screens all the time, part of the job. Social media is literally part of my job, as absurd as that might be. And I find that I really have to force myself to get on social media again. Now, once you get into the rhythm of it and you're conditioned again, then it's the opposite. You have to force yourself to not pick up your phone and start looking at X or whatever. But when you've kind of detoxed from it, you don't have that instinct anymore, and you kind of have to force yourself to do it. And I think that probably tells us something about these screens. Is Matt excited for the new Saw movie? I mean, are you kidding? It's Saw 11, right? Is what we're on? Yeah, I know that. I'm just testing you. Saw 11. I can't even sleep at night. I mean, that's how excited I am for the new Saw movie. 11 Saw films, 11 of them, and that's not enough. I need a Saw film every month. I need a new one every month. Because they made the first one like 20 years ago, so they make one Saw movie like every 2 years. That's not nearly enough, in my view. They made a movie about people being tortured by a serial killer, and then they said, we need 10 more of these. We need these to never end. We just need this exact plot, this exact movie repeated over and over and over again. We just need to see more and more people being tortured. Actually, there is no plot. You don't need a plot. We just need this. We need this to continue forever. We need 25 hours of this. We need a decade and a half of movies about people being tortured to death. That's what the world needs right now. That's the kind of material the world needs, is that. That's what they said when they made the first movie, and I couldn't agree more. And I was just so excited. I'll be first in line. You better believe it. I'll be camping out overnight to get into the Saw 11. I'll be the only one. It'll be a line of just me, camped out with my sleeping bag, 3 days ahead of time to see Saw 11. Really excited. Let's get to the daily cancellation. It was just a couple of weeks ago that we discussed the sudden rise of an actor named Karla Sofía Gascón, who stars in one of the worst movies ever made, Emilia Perez. And in case you're not familiar with it, which you probably aren't because no one has actually seen this film, Emilia Perez is a musical about a male cartel boss who gets a sex change so that he can reinvent himself as a caring family man, or family woman, I guess. Nothing about the plot makes sense. The acting's atrocious. The musical numbers are excruciating, seemingly by design. To give you an idea of the caliber of writing on display, at one point an actor in a gender clinic sings the line, "From penis to vagina." So you can pull up the footage if you're so inclined. I can't bear to play it again, but if you want to, you can find it. Nevertheless, the movie has been a huge hit. It has not been a hit with audiences or in theaters or even really with movie critics, but it has been a hit with the awards shows because Gascón identifies as transgender. So they finally have some of that trans representation they're always demanding. At long last, a so-called trans character was being played by a man who identifies as a woman. In Hollywood, this is an achievement on par with, the moon landing or even greater than that. For months, they haven't been able to contain their excitement. So the Academy, in their enthusiasm, nominated Gascón for the Best Actress Award along with 12 other awards, making it one of the most nominated films of all time. Now, at the time, it seemed pretty clear how this story would play out. It was easy to assume, as I did, that Gascón would inevitably win the award, become the first ever man to win Best Actress. For the first time in history, men would win both major acting awards at the Oscars. And then all the actual women would have to pretend to be very enthusiastic about this development. And this would be how the Academy would strike back at Donald Trump, fascism, and so on. In fact, in some ways, I was kind of looking forward to it. I was looking forward to the clip of this man winning Best Actress and then cutting immediately to all the women who lost and just seeing them pretend to be excited in that moment. I was kind of looking forward to that. And but it looks like it may not happen, tragically. As it turns out, at the last minute, the script has been totally upended. And it's been upended in the most fitting way, which is that Karla Sofía Gascón has just been canceled because of his old tweets. Yeah, we have ourselves a good old-fashioned old tweets cancellation for the first time in a while. I mean, this is like a relic from a lost civilization or something. But it's happening again. It's pretty fascinating. Watch.
Oscar nominee Karla Sofía Gascón is catching heat for controversial takes she posted online in recent years about everything from Islam to George Floyd. The Amelia Perez's Stars posts on X started to make the rounds early Thursday morning and were deleted not soon after. Less than a month after Floyd was murdered in Minnesota in 2020, inciting nationwide Black Lives Matter rallies, Gascón shared these words, saying, "I truly believe that very few people ever cared about George Floyd," and calling him a drug addict and a hustler. Later that year, she took aim at Muslims in her native Spain when she wrote this post that says, in part, "Sorry, is it just my impression, or are there more and more Muslims in Spain? Every time I go to pick up my daughter from school, there are more women with their hair covered and their skirts down to their heels."
So these are the first two highly incendiary, totally cancel-worthy tweets that The Hollywood Reporter chose to cite. And it's a little odd since there's nothing remotely interesting about either tweet that they read. Saying that there are a lot of Muslim people in Spain is just an observation about demographics, also happens to be true. Then, of course, there's the first tweet, which is equally inoffensive, saying let's call him Drug Floyd, saying that Drug Floyd was a drug addict and a hustler is probably the kindest, most sanitized way that you could describe George Floyd, a.k.a. Drug Floyd. If anything, I'm offended that he was far too nice to George Floyd. But to be clear, that tweet was one of several that Gascón posted about Floyd. Here's another. The post that's translated on X read as follows, quote, "Let me get this straight. A guy tries to pass off a counterfeit bill after consuming methamphetamine. An idiot policeman arrives and goes too far in arresting him, killing him, ruining the lives of his family and colleagues, and turning the guy with the bill into a martyr hero." So if there's anything offensive about that tweet, it's that he got the facts wrong. First of all, the predominant drug in Floyd's system was not meth, it was fentanyl. He had enough fentanyl in his body to kill a horse when he died, something that the prosecution repeatedly lied about during the trial. Secondly, the policeman was not an idiot, nor did he kill George Floyd. So these are basic facts that Gascón got wrong. But to be fair, a lot of people in the media in general, get those facts wrong because the media lies about them constantly, even now. At this point, as I'm reading through this, I wasn't sure what the fuss was about, so I kept on reading. And then I found some of the spicier tweets, as the kids would say. For example, there's this one, quote, "More and more, the Oscars are looking like a ceremony for independent and protest films. I didn't know if I was watching an Afro-Korean festival, a Black Lives Matter demonstration, or the 8M feminist strike. Apart from that, an ugly, ugly gala." Well, okay, now we're getting somewhere, maybe. You could start to see why the Academy is taking some of this personally. At the same time, again, he's right, and his take is completely reasonable. He called out the Oscars for implementing DEI everywhere and using the awards ceremony for activism. The Academy even implemented explicit racial quotas in its selection process a few years ago, and it shows. But at the same time, of course, these tweets are hitting a little close to home for the Oscars, I suppose. Now, there are other tweets that have been dug up, apparently, although he deleted his account, and the tweets are in a different language, so it's hard for me to verify most of them. Not that I'm interested in expending that kind of effort for something like this anyway. Evidently, he tweeted something insulting about one of his co-stars, Selena Gomez, although I believe it was before they worked together. And allegedly, he posted some other tweets about Muslims that were considerably more insulting than the one that I read a couple of minutes ago. And whatever you think of whatever this guy tweeted, that was his opinion. And you wouldn't think it would have any impact one way or another on how his performance in the film or the film itself are perceived. Now, both the film and his performance are already terrible, but if you thought they were both brilliant, as Academy voters apparently did, you should still think that. But of course, they're throwing him under the bus. And in response, he came out and delivered a big apology in a desperate attempt to save his bid for Best Actress. Here's one report on what he said.
Oscar nominee Karla Sofía Gascón is apologizing amid online controversy. The Emilia Perez star expresses her regret for recently resurfaced past offensive posts she made on X, formerly known as Twitter, that appeared to target Muslims, the killing of George Floyd, and diversity at the Oscars. In a statement shared to NBC News via a Netflix spokesperson, on January 30th, Karla says, quote, "I want to acknowledge the conversation around my past social media posts that have caused hurt. As someone in a marginalized community, I know this suffering all too well, and I am deeply sorry to those I have caused pain. All my life I have fought for a better world. I believe light will always triumph over darkness."
Inspiring. So he immediately hides behind the idea that he's in a marginalized community, quote unquote, even though he was just nominated for an Oscar for a film that is objectively atrocious. It's actually the opposite of being marginalized. And the whole act isn't working anymore. The social media mob was not appeased. As a result, Gascón isn't being allowed to appear at any Oscars event for the film. And now his own director doesn't want anything to do with him. Here's what the director told Deadline, quote, "It's very hard for me to think back to the work I did with Karla Sofía, the trust we share, the exceptional atmosphere that we had on set that was indeed based on trust. And when you have that kind of relationship and suddenly you read something that the person has said, things that are absolutely hateful and worthy of being hated, of course that relationship is affected. It's as if you fall into a hole because what Karla Sofía said is inexcusable. I haven't spoken to her and I don't want to. She is in a self-destructive approach that I can't interfere in, and I really don't understand why she's continuing. Why is she harming herself? I don't understand it. And what I don't understand about this, too, is why she's harming people who are already close to her. She's really playing the victim. She's talking about herself as a victim, which is surprising. It's as if she thought that words don't hurt, close quote. And of course, in your head, put the air quotes around she and her throughout that entire quote. I was just telling you what the guy said. This, by the way, is like everyone in Hollywood. I think some of his co-stars too, but they're just throwing him under the bus completely. This is the kind of loyalty. This is the director of a film you worked with for a long time, professed to be a friend, and just immediately throwing him under the bus. Like no hesitation. Total disavowal, right, of a friend. This is the loyalty you get in Hollywood. And now we're being told that the trans-identifying actor is not allowed to play the victim. Even though when he stood up at the Golden Globes and said trans people were being killed in the streets or whatever, which isn't true, that was fine. But now his cloak of marginalization doesn't work anymore. Now he's persona non grata in Hollywood. In a matter of weeks, he's gone from giving weepy speeches at the Golden Globes to being disowned by his own director. And this whole saga, a sordid and weird tale as it is, tells us everything we need to know about modern Hollywood, because Gascón hasn't been canceled for starring in one of the worst movies ever made. It's not as if everyone just woke up and actually watched this film and realized how unimaginably bad it is. That didn't happen. Nor has Gascón been canceled for deciding in middle age that he's really a woman, even though no one with two functioning eyes or ears would confuse him for a woman. None of that happened. When they loved this guy, were ready to shower him with awards when he was a cross-dressing man appropriating womanhood in the worst movie ever made. But he crossed the line by tweeting some true things about George Floyd 4 years ago. And then people went looking through his other tweets and saw that he made fun of Selena Gomez and the Hollywood elites. And in the end, That's what will cost him the Best Actress award. Hollywood has gone so insane that a terrible male actor in a bad film will now lose out on the Academy Award for Best Actress, but for reasons that have nothing to do with the fact that it was a bad performance in a bad film, or with the fact that he is, a man. And that is why all the people who are canceling Karla Sofía Gascón for his old tweets, instead of the fact that he's a man pretending to be a woman and that he can't act and that his movie is bad, are today themselves canceled. That'll do it for the show today and this week. Talk to you next week. Have a great weekend. Godspeed. The executive producer of the Matt Walsh Show is Sean Hampton. Our associate producer is McKenna Michaelis. The show is directed by Mark Jones and Trey Miller. Our production manager is Austin Michaelis. The show is edited by Jeff Tomlin. Our lead audio engineer is Mike Coromina. Our audio engineer is Ryan Reese. Our hair and makeup artists are Cherokee Hart and Andrea Bauer. Our wardrobe stylists are Kristen Galarraga and Cameron Latzko. Our director of post-production is Matthew Kemp. Director of production operations is Pavel Vodosky. Our chief broadcast engineer is Jeff Govin. And our assistant broadcast engineer is Allegra Rohr. Our lighting director is Keith Duggan. Our playback operators are CJ Hickish and Finn Pope. Our show assistant is Holly Merritt. And our production assistant is Mike Moran. Executive in charge of production is David Wormus. Executive producer is Jeremy Boring. The Matt Walsh Show is a Daily Wire production. Copyright Daily Wire 2024.
Hi, this is Andrew Klavan. If you like American flags and automatic weapons and shaking your fist at homosexuals while fighter jets fly over in formation, come to the Andrew Klavan Show. We don't have any of that, but we will be making fun of idiots and praising God and laughing our way through the fall of the Republic. It's like an insane asylum for happy people. That's the Andrew Klavan Show right here on Daily Wire Plus.